Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph at the very top. After the Gemara brings various shittos in regards to Taroives Chometz, both that which is mixed with Chometz during Pesach, as well as that which is mixed with Chometz after Pesach, the Gemara now brings the halacha. Omar Rove Hilchasa Chometz Bizmanoi Bein Bemino Bein Shaloi Beminoi Oser B'mashu Kirav. Rava paskins like Rav in regards to Chometz that is mixed on Pesach itself. If it's B'minoi, so the shita of Rav is Kol Isun Shebatara is going to be also B'mashu. That means a mashu of Chometz that is mixed together with non-Chometz. If it's B'minoi, it's the same type, so then we will say that it will not be nullified and therefore will be osir. So although he doesn't hold that in regard to she'eno b'minoi, but nonetheless, he makes a gezerah, as explained before in Amud Beis, that Rav says that when it comes to chametz, it's easy for a person to make a mistake and eat chametz, since during the rest of the year, he also eats chametz. So he can easily then accidentally eat chametz. Plus, chametz is something that's osir and has an anash of kares. So therefore, Rav says, we'll make a gezerah of shaloi b'minoi, ota b'minoi, and therefore that will also oiser b'mashuhu. So that's how Rava paskins like Rav in regards to, again, a tarovis chametz on Pesach. Shaloi b'zmano, but chametz that is after Pesach, bein b'minoi, bein shaloi b'minoi, mutter. Then Rava paskins that it's going to be mutter. Ki Rabbi Shimon, like the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Since Rabbi Shimon says that Chametz she'over alav Pesach is mutter, therefore there's no problem with a taroivis of Chametz after Pesach, whether it's b'mino, ben shaloi b'mino. Says the Gemara asking the following, Umi Omar Rove Hachi, did Rove really paskin the latter psak of Chametz that's over she'over alav HaPesach, that which passed over and is after Pesach will be mutter bein b'mino and ben shaloi b'minoi. Omar Rava, behold, if he says that's so because he passes like Rabbi Shimon, but Rabbi Shimon kanase konis hoyel v'over alav bebaye Rava yimatze. But it was Rava that pointed out that even Rabbi Shimon, who says it's mutter midi araisa, but says that since a person was oiver bal yero bal yimatze during Pesach, we will kindness. Chacham will kindness him, and therefore after Pesach, that chametz is osir midirabanan, bein be'achila, bein behano. Answers the Gemara, Hani mili, when is this so? Be'enei, aval al yedei taroivis loy. When is it a knas of chametz over alav Pesach? That's when it's be'ein, it's intact. But if it's mixed together, then a taroivis is not considered to be included in this knas. The Gemara points out this is like Rava's shita, which he states somewhere else. Doma Rava ki havinon. Now, when Rava, that which he says that the chametz she'over alav Pesach shel nachri is mutter lechatchila, he is learning like the shita of Rabbi Shimon, not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda would say that he has a pasuk of lo ye'ochel, teaching me that it's aser be'achile and bahana, bein shel nachi, bein shel Yisrael. So here the Gemara is bringing out the shita of Rava that says like Rabbi Shimon. D'omar Rava ki havinam be Rav Nachman. When we were in the Beis HaMedrash learning by Rav Nachman, ki havu nafki shiva yomi Pesach, and after the week of Pesach went out, Omar lo, and he said to us, Puku V'zavinu chamira de bnei chela. Go out and buy your chametz from the army of the Nachrim. In other words, you can take their chametz, their baked items, their baked bread, and you can buy it. So we see clearly that the shita is that chametz shel Pesach is going to be mutter behana shel Nachri, just like Rabbi Shimon says. Says the Gemara Vayter Omar Rav. Rav said the following statement in regards to those pots that were used before Pesach, and they have now chametz inside of them, and they're made out of ceramic, out of cheres. What's the din now that it's now Pesach? Omar Rav stated, Kedeirois ba Pesach ishavru. Those pots, again, that were used before Pesach, and now have chametz inside of them, in the cheres, so you must break them, says Rav. Ask the Gemara, why? Vamai, lash'inu achar ha-Pesach, v'li'abe behu shelo b'minon. Leave it until after Pesach, and then after Pesach, then you can go ahead and use it with that which is not b'minoi, which Rav Shita is that that's okay. Answers the Gemara, Gzeira dilma asu li'me'abe behu b'minoi. The Gemara says that, but Rav says if it's b'mino, it's also, and therefore he says there's a gezer even of sheloi b'minoi atu minoi. And therefore, he says such a klicheres you must break, even though that technically you can use the klicheres to store cold items inside of it, but there's a concern that you might come to use this pot, and therefore he says yishavru, you should break it. Ushmuel Omar, and Shmuel said, Lo yishavru, you shall not break such a kli cheres. Aval mashi luhu la'achar zmanoi. Leave it until after Pesach. Ve'ovid buhu bein b'mino, bein b'shelo b'mino. And then you can use it whether it's b'mino or shelo b'mino. Because the shita of Shmuel is like Rabbi Shimon, that it's not going to be also after Pesach. Ve'oz Shmuel l'tamei. And Shmuel goes according to his reasoning, like he mentioned somewhere else, Domar Shmuel. Lehanhu demazvnei kangei. Those that sold pots, ashvu zavinu akandayechi. He said to them, do not raise your prices for these pots that you're selling. V'ilo, if not, if you're going to raise the prices, then darshina lechul keRabbi Shimon. Then I will then darshin berabim that it is mutter after Pesach, and therefore people will not come to buy from you because they'll know that there's no reason to not use their kelim and kelim pots that had chametz in them if they're going to be used after Pesach, the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Ask the Gemara, Lidush lahu. Why doesn't he then anyways tell and expound that to the rabbim so that they don't have to then go ahead and anyways buy such pots? The Shmuel Rabbi Shimon svirulei. After all, Shmuel goes like Rabbi Shimon. And after Pesach, there's no concern about chametz shaval Pesach. Answers the Gemara, Asrei the Rav Hava, because Shmuel, he was in the locale, in the area where Rav was the Rav, and therefore he didn't want to then encroach on his shita. But truly, Shmuel's own shita is like Rabbi Shimon, although Rav goes like Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara now says, Hahu tanura de tachu beitiche. If there's a tanur, an oven, that was greased with tiche. Here we're talking about the permitted fat of sheep, and that was used to grease this tanur. So it states over here, Asra rove bar iloi lemichle lerifta afilo b'milcha la'olam. So he's assered any bread that would be baked in such an oven, even if it was plain. That's what it means, afilo b'milcha. And he said, la'olam, mashma, even beyond, if you would go ahead and heat up such an oven and bake the bread, that would still be osir. Because dilma osi lemichla kutcha. Because you might come to then eat it with a dish that was crumbled bread, that was a dairy dish, it was mixed with milk. And therefore, since this bread would be then having some of the shuman, some of the meat inside of it, and then you might come to eat it with kutcha, therefore it would be a problem of mixing it, meat and milk together. Ask the Gemara, Meisvei, Ein lashin es ha'isa becholov, you can't take dough and knead it with milk. V'im losh, and if you do, then kol hapas kula asura mnei hergel aveira, then all of the bread that comes out as a result is rendered to be osir. Why? Because you might come to then eat the bread with meat, and therefore there will be a problem of mixture of meat and milk together. Kayotzei boy, the Brisa goes on to say, on top of Lamed Amud Beis, Ein tashin esatanu be'aliyah. You cannot grease your tana, your oven, with the fatty tail of a keves. V'im tosh, kol hatpas kula asura asher yazik es hatanur. And if you do grease with this fat of the tail of the keves, which then has a meat going into the tanur, then the entire tanur is going to be osir until you reheat up this tanur. So Gemara makes a deal from this brisa. Husak tanur miyashari. But if you would then husak the tanur again, reheat it again, then it would be mutter. So that's going to be a kasha on what we said before, because just earlier, the sheet of Rava bar Hiloi was to aser such a tanur la'olam. Says the Gemara, tiyufta de Rava bar Ahiloi tiyufta. Indeed, there's going to be a refutation from this brisa. Omar le Ravid le Ravashi v'chi me'achadi toisav Rava bar Ahiloi. Once we came and refuted his opinion, and therefore said you can go ahead and rekindle such an oven and use it to bake with. Amai ka'omar Rav kederos ba'pesach yishavru. Then why did Rav say that you have to break such a tanur, such a kedera rather, such a pot? Even though the pot is made out of ceramic, but hare, you can go ahead and use it by rekindling it, reheating it up once again. Omar le, the Gemara answered, because hasam tanur shel mateches. That which we said, if you go ahead and relight, that heat it up again, and that will be mutter, then bake with that tanur new bread. That's talking about when it was made out of mateches. But the kidera that he pasuled, that we're talking about was a kidera made of cheres, and therefore that would not be valid. And therefore, according to Rav, you'd have to break it. Alternatively, if you want to say, even this tanur that we said, if you were husak, once again, it will be mutter. That's talking about a kli cheres. Then why, ask the Gemara, do we have to break the kedera according to Rav? Just go ahead and husak, go ahead and heat it up once again and use it. Says the Gemara, no. That which we said you can reuse the tanur once again when you heat it up and then break bread with that new tanur, which is newly heated up. That's because it was heated up from the inside. But that which we said in terms of the kedera, that Rav said you have to break, yeshavru, is talking about when it was heated up from the outside. Therefore, that cannot be reused. V'chitem, you'll say, but hachenami, if you'll say, why don't you go ahead and just reheat it from the inside also, whereby that will allow you to then use such a pot again? Answers the Gemara, because chayis alea mishum depoka, because a person is concerned that it will cause such a kedera to break if he's going to heat up from the inside. Therefore, it's not going to be valid. In other words, he'll come to then say that since they allow you to go ahead and matter it, to kasher it, if you heat it up from the inside, so he rationalizes and says, I'll just heat up from the outside and that will be good enough. But we know that he's concerned about letting it break. He doesn't want it to break, and therefore he won't even come to then heat up in the right way. So such a thing, we say, is going to then thereby be invalid. Whereby Rav says you have to break such a kedera. Therefore the Gemara says, Hilka chai buchya, hisiku mi bachutzu va'aser. The Gemara says, therefore when it comes to such a kli that's made out of ceramic, very strong ceramic, there, since it's so strong, there's not a concern that a person will not heat up from the inside. He's not concerned that it will break. And therefore, we say, hisiku mi bachutz hu va'aser. We say that person, we're not going to say he's going to only heat up from the outside. It'll be valid. He'll heat it up even from the inside. He won't rationalize. And therefore, such a buchya, if he will then heat it up from the outside, it will be osir. He has to heat up from the inside. V'imalya gumri shapir dami. However, if he fills it up with coals, and therefore heating up from the inside, then we said it is valid. In other words, when it comes to a buchya, if he's going to heat it from the outside, obviously it will not be good enough. But if we fill up with coals, then we say that he's going to then heat it from the inside. He's not concerned about it breaking, because a buchya is made of very, very strong cheres that does not break from such heat. So therefore, if he does, again, fill it up with coals, then we believe and we see that he is going to heat it up from the inside. Whereas when it came to the buchya, not the buchya, but to the case before of the kedera, there we're concerned that he will not truly heat up from the inside, he'll only heat it from the outside because he doesn't want it to break. So again, it comes to buchya, from the outside it will not be valid, but from the inside, since he's not concerned about breaking, he will then heat it up and it will be valid.